Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the WSESU School Board to order at 6 o'clock, and I have a statement to read. The meeting of the WSESU will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of technical difficulties that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. That's it. Okay, other than I would like to publicly discuss what we discussed at our meeting with the VSBA during new business, I don't have any changes to make to this agenda. Does anybody else desire to make changes to this agenda? Great. Moving along, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of September 13th, 2023.
So made.
Thank you, Tim. Any comments, corrections, deletions, additions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Moving on to the consent agenda to finance. I'm going to make a motion here. I move that we approve the warrants of September 13th, 2023 in the amount of $444,649.18. Excuse me. The payrolls of September 8th, 2023 in the amount of $587,436.24. The warrants of September 7th, 2023 in the amount of $496,082.31. And the payroll of September 22nd, 2023 in the amount of $597,406.61. Okay, I've moved it. Any discussion?
Was 10, 11, 23 in there?
10, 11,
No.
We just got it.
Right, so I have to warn it in order to publicly approve.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you, the warrants and payrolls are approved. Frank, did you have anything to talk about to us during this portion of finance?
I would just say that we have the quarterly report on the website for year-to-date September 30, 2023, so the first quarter of the fiscal year. Wasn't really planning on elaborating on that, but just in case folks were interested, it's on the website under Finance and the central office.
That's fine, and I will always hold this space for you. If you don't have anything, you don't have anything. If you do, it's open for you.
Terrific. Thank you.
I have a finance comment to make.
Sure.
I think it's great that the district gives students who are experiencing temporary homelessness laundry cards.
Yes, I agree with
That's
that.
in the warrants. I didn't know that we did that, but that's a really good thing.
Yes, I appreciate that action, and congratulations to whoever's idea it was and whoever implemented it. Well done, thank you.
The practice was initiated by our former McKinney-Vento liaison, Carol Rail, who was also the former counselor at Vernon School for many years. That role, the MV coordinator, is now Tricia Hill, former administrative assistant at Oak Grove School.
Tricia's doing a great job.
Yeah, she really is.
I'm glad to hear it. Little things mean a whole lot. Okay, so moving on from finance to the administrative report, I believe we have not one but two presentations to hear tonight, so off we go.
We do. Thank you, Anne. So the first report tonight is around Act 173, which we've presented a couple of times over the past few years. But tonight, it's an opportunity to give you some understanding of where we are in terms of guidance around 173 and what we have implemented in our schools. So we have Whitney, Tate, and Brandy here tonight who are going to take the lead. And I'll turn it over to, I think Whitney's starting us off.
Brandy's going to start.
Oh, Brandy, great.
Morning. All right, welcome everybody. So as Mark said, we're going to review Act 173 and our multi-layered system of supports and how those two go together. So, and again, this is something that I'm changing it on my.
Just give me the high side.
We've gone over before, and I think it's worth continuing to go over because there's a lot to understand. But the basic premise is that it's moving from this reimbursement model of per student on an IEP to a more like block funded or census-based model where it's a total number of students. The funding is per total number of students versus individuals. And those recommendations come from the University of Vermont study on funding special education. And what I think is really great about this is this kind of connection with our multi-layered system of supports, our MLSS, is that the hope here is that we can provide more equity in services and effectiveness and availability to all students instead of just, identifying this child on an IEP or this child, is getting academic support. We can kind of mix and move kids around as needed, depending on their different subject matters that they need support in or content areas and skills. So I think that's really important. It's not so restrictive. And
That's right.
And
Can I chime in on that?
Yeah.
A little bit? Because I experienced that today at Putney Central School. Sat in on a series of data meetings where we're looking at fall benchmark data and then looking at intervention opportunities. And the conversations were so rich and there were no limits to special educators working with just students who were identified. And it was totally embraced by the teams. And it was a nice change in climate. Kids were getting what they need without waiting for a plan, which takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Last year as a school leadership team, we read that your student, my student, our students, and I think this is a real reflection of this capacity of they're all of our students, right. And we have a responsibility to educate all of them and meet their needs where they're at.
Yeah. So this is going to impact us by changing our special ed laws related to Act 173 and in some main areas about what the definition of special education is, really refining our understanding of specially designed instruction, changing our adverse effect, adding that you don't have to find 3 areas in one basic skill area that are below the lowest 15th percentile. It's just document that you have a body of evidence that demonstrates adverse effect. And as well, that they added something called functional skills that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is a non-academic area to consider for adverse effect, such as your transferable skills or your executive functioning skills. And then our pattern of strengths and weaknesses, which is a new process for identifying specific learning disabilities. Okay. So the patterns of strengths and weaknesses is really about using a dual deficit model for identifying learning disabilities. And I wanted to tell you a little more because in the past we used a discrepancy between your IQ and your achievement in basic skill areas. Assuming that you have average IQ, you would think that your achievement would fall at that same level. In this one, we're looking for an area of processing deficit, such as that your phonological processing is impacting your basic reading skills. So there's an area that's a processing deficit. It could be things like processing speed, short-term memory, language processing. And then is it correlated research-based to be linked to that area of academic skill that's of concern? So it's a more elaborate and detailed process. It's very much aligned with what neuropsychologists do for assessment batteries. And it's a way for us to really help rule out if we're having instructional casualties, which we may have at times because we're changing our systems and kids move a lot within our different communities. And so we get kids that have different skill sets or experiences in school, and then they come to us and we might identify a concern, and then we really rule out, is this something that's more environmental or their experience versus or even poor instruction versus having that deficit in a processing area and then a corresponding achievement deficit that you can identify. Okay, ready for the next one. All right, so I guess we just really covered that. This is also called the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory, and so there's a link in there so that you can look further at what those processing areas are. And why we're using it, really, it's been really shown that that we can find these patterns. It assumes that there is a student has generally basically average cognitive abilities, and that this is an area that's an island of weakness within that, so that you're not saying that a student's all of their skills or their intellectual abilities are all low. You're saying generally they would be in the average range. But it helps us identify the disability, and it also helps us understand then how that processing difference and those pieces can be differentiated, individualized, and then targeted with interventions. I think it gets us to be more specific about what we're going to do for interventions. All right, so with that, we use multiple sources of data. We are a data-driven, decision-making focused district, and we use the similar tests, but we add a few extra ones to that. And then it references there that island of weakness in the sea of strengths. We are also looking at student strengths. Next one, Paul. Okay, and then this just goes on to again show that those differences and why this pattern is important. And really, we're really also focused on those strengths and how we can leverage those strengths to help students access their education. Okay. So the changes in adverse effect we did go over, no longer needing to find 3 out of 6 areas in one basic skill area, but it's multiple sources. And number 3 on this item is very interesting, that it does not need to be substantial, significant, or marked, but it's more than minor or transient hindrance. So it's really with multiple sources of data, and it's really not to include developmentally appropriate characteristics of age and grade peers. So not to say, oh, they're not good at this, but most kids in their grade wouldn't be expected to be good at a basic skill at that time in their academic career. And then that they consider academic and non-academic aspects of the child's functioning, which brings us into the other area that it changed with adverse effect, which is functional skills. And functional skills really are, we're calling it the kitchen sink. It is, it's all of your executive functioning skills, your transferable skills, how you interact with people. And it's an area where things like social pragmatic language might be considered. And that's where you are, so to speak, reading between the lines in your interactions about voice tone, your body language, what you didn't say, things like that can be a little more challenging for some people to understand as readily. It is a skill you can learn. But these are the skills you need to increase your independence in work and in your school and community. So it is a very broad area. It's something we're learning about actively in that it's very new to us. Some of the questions that we're coming around to are, how are our programming helping build students' social emotional learning and executive functioning skills? How are we instructing that? How are we intervening with that and providing those short-term interventions? And then how are we progress monitoring it? So those are things we're learning as we continue to work with this new set of legislation and process. Okay, and so this is a piece of what our Act 173 theory of action levers are, and that's that we have high quality education support teams. We have an effective local comprehensive assessment system. We have a coordinated and research-based curriculum. And then we have targeted needs-based professional development. These are focuses of our CIP and our administrative team. And then it's the best practice of giving core instruction to meet the needs of most, adding those additional layers of instruction and intervention in addition to that core instruction, and then that the layers come from our most highly skilled teachers. And that's that piece that Mark was talking about a team coming together, looking at data and not saying, oh, that's a layer 2 student, or that's a special ed student. They're saying, nope, we have these students, they need these skills, and they're working collaboratively as a team to see who will be the best person to deliver that instruction or that intervention. Finally, having a system-wide approach to support positive student behavior, and then we target specialized supports for students with more intensive needs. So these are critical for our Act 173. All right, yeah, we really covered that. Now Whitney's going to talk about MLSS.
Yeah, so I get to talk about the fun stuff. So Act 173 is great because those 4 pillars that Tate just talked about really lead into the foundation for a strong MLSS system. And so, you know, these changes have happened that are required at the state level, but really it's actually just the best practice teaching that we want to do as a system anyway. And so that's looking into a little bit about what MLSS looks like for us this year. This may or may not be a new graphic to you. This is in our assessment toolkit, and it really just serves to illustrate the layered approach that we're taking with kids. We want to make sure that all of our kids are getting that universal core instruction in literacy and math. We know that that's essential. That has been, you know, proven by research. And then there are kids that are going to need some additional layers, and they might need multiple additional layers. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we have the right staffing and the right supports there to meet the needs of kids. And so that's what, you know, when we look at ASTs and special educators and counselors and social workers, there's just a lot of different layers of support. So making sure that those are matched to student needs.
The thing I like about this graphic is it makes the point that most of the intervention, most of the layers of support are intended to be occurring within core instruction. Mm-hmm. Like there's some outside of that big purple box, but most of it is supposed to be happening in core instruction.
Mm-hmm. And then this kind of pulls that apart a little bit and illustrates it further with a bit more detail. What might that look like for a student? You know, most of our students should be successful with just that layer 1. What might that look like for a student who's receiving just that layer 1 support? And then what could that look like for layer 2? Sometimes we think layer 2, oh, that's a different, you know, we need a different person or an AST teacher, and not necessarily. A layer 2 intervention might be the classroom teacher working with the kid for 5 minutes at the beginning of choice time, you know, and so really thinking creatively about, you know, what are all of our resources and what are all of those layers look like? An important piece that you'll see in there is progress monitoring. And that's a big commitment that we are making as a district this year to have that be part of our regular practice. It's outlined in our assessment toolkit. And that's, you know, your roadmap for instruction and how you know what to teach. And especially when you get into those layers 3 and 4, really essential to make sure that your day-to-day planning is specialized. I was talking with a kindergarten teacher turned special educator this year, and she was just mentioning, she's like, you know, it's so interesting. When I was planning for kindergarten, I planned and I really had like the outline of my whole year planned out, and I could do that in the fall and kind of know like what the scope of my whole year was going to look like. Now as a special educator, I only know what tomorrow's going to look like because my lessons for that next day are dependent entirely on how the kids do today. And that's what is so powerful about that type of specialized instruction, is that it is, you know, it is day to day and based entirely on how your kids are performing. And that's, you know, the power of really great teaching.
It's a good example.
And then, so as a district, one thing that we did this past spring was all the schools did an MLSS implementation rubric. So they kind of self-assessed as a school in different teams. And they looked at those 8 different categories there that are outlined on the right-hand side of the screen, and looked at, like, as a school, how are we doing with progress monitoring? How are we doing with our layer 2 interventions? What are our needs? And so each school has that data for themselves. And one thing that we've done, each school has an MLSS team that's really championing this work at each site over the course of the year. And there's one member of that team that has also been appointed to a district level team. So now we have a district level MLSS team that has at least one representative from each school site, and that also has a representative kind of buddy partner from the central office world, whether that's myself or Brandy or Tate or Bryn or Paul. Mark is part of this team. And so we're really trying to come together to make sure that we've got some common district level language and that we're making decisions and thinking about how we're moving forward as a district, and then also having that communication go back to the schools, and then, you know, the representative at the school being able to share back with the district team what's working well, what's not working, what do we need, so that ideally that communication around what's happening with this and how we're moving it forward is seamless.
And that's a new addition to our system this year, which we're excited about. And we've had some initial meetings, and it's another opportunity to get away from the silo effect of just being in your building every day, all day, but also having opportunities to regular, structured, planned opportunities to meet with collaborators at all of the schools. So we're excited about that. And we're doing the same thing with EST, which you're probably getting to.
So it sounds like this is about self-evaluation in terms of whether the program itself is working in the given school.
This rubric is self-evaluation for MLSS systems as a whole, and that is actually like a clickable link. If you want to look at that rubric, it's a pretty lengthy rubric, but it asks teachers and the people that were on the team to evaluate. It's not necessarily evaluating a specific academic or core program. It's kind of evaluating the systems set up in the school as a whole.
So can I just add to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've done a ton of work at the admin team level around MLSS development. And last year, as we continued this work, began to think about, we're doing this work as a team, but every school's in their own place. Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't assume that just because we're doing this work in this PD, that every school is in the same place. So each school has weaknesses and strengths. So this survey was to really narrow in on what are the things we're doing great, and really what are the things we need to improve. And that's going to be different at each of our schools.
And there's things that people can learn
from each other.
Other's schools and strengths. Yeah.
Right.
So can you give an example of an area that needs improvement?
Yes, next slide.
Oh, great.
Good segue.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's perfect.
Right.
This is the district-wide data here. Right. So each school has this own graph, but for their site. But this is what we're using as a district to help us make district-wide goals. And so when I mentioned progress monitoring, that's really top of mind for me, because as a district, that was our lowest rated area. And we know that if we simply monitor kids' progress, we're going to be more in tune with what's working and not working for them, and they're going to make more progress.
Just like the temperature checks, if you remember from some presentations last year that Bryn had put together.
So these are, and fidelity and evaluation, that was another area. So those lower areas as a district, we know that we need to work on, but then at individual school sites, what those MLSS teams are doing at each of those school sites is making a goal for their school. That's our target for our next district-wide MLSS meeting is for each school to walk out of that with one or two specific and measurable goals based on this survey that they think is really going to make a significant impact in their MLSS system moving forward over the course of this year.
Yeah, and this is another way to differentiate a school supervisory union action plan versus an individual school action plan, where schools can really target where they need to improve under the umbrella of the SU plan.
Mm-hmm.
The AOE says that this really cuts down on bureaucratic time. Under the former system, the reimbursement system, schools would have to do a lot of labor-intensive stuff to get the money back from the state. This is essentially a census block grant. So that's bureaucratically, it saves time. The argument, I think I read about a year ago in the Vermont Digger, is that most of the school districts are getting less money for special ed. So is that true?
It is. The other side of this is it's driving cost containment. They're saying that our special ed costs are, continuing to escalate and are outside of national levels for spending. So this is one of those vehicles. The hope really is that our MLSS systems get so strong in providing really high quality layer one core instruction for all, and then having really responsive interventions that in a few years, because it will take a few years, it could take 3 to 5 years, we'll start reducing our number of referrals to special ed because we've got this. And we feel confident that we're meeting at least a minimum of, let's say, 80 to 85% of students' needs without any kind of consideration of specialized instruction.
So this is laying out a little bit what I just talked about with the district level team as well. So goals that we have for those school-based MLSS teams is, oh, you're good. Identifying those goals based on the survey, working on targeted action steps. So if we've got that goal, can we map out, that'll be the next step. Once we have a really clear goal, can we map out what are the action steps going to be over the course of the year to get us there? So that will be continued work with that steering committee. And then there will also be a chance in the spring for school teams to take that survey again and self-assess and see where did we grow, what did this look like, how did we do? So we're thinking about different types of supports across the district that really will help to move this work forward. And some of that is within our EST systems. That's another big area that we've talked about at other meetings, but that work is continuing with representatives from each school, the EST coordinators coming together with Becky Peloso and I over the course of the year. And so we're doing continued work on refining EST plans and really making sure that our EST plans have measurable and specific goals. And we've got some new tools for the EST coordinators to use because they don't always have a background or training in what that looks like. And so as special educators, that's something that we do a lot. And we have a great tool that we've used for a long time in special education, but now we're piloting that with our EST coordinators to see how they like using this tool called Goal Book, which is just a really comprehensive and wonderful tool that we can use to help make sure that our EST plans are targeted and goal driven, which ideally will reduce the number of EST plans that we need over time, because that idea for that is that they are short term and that we're able to catch kids up and then they're able to be successful with fewer layers of support. So that's just some of the things that are happening with MLSS this year. And then themes that we keep coming back to is just that, it's nobody's fault that we are where we are, especially post-COVID. It's intense. The amount of need that we have right now feels like a lot, but it is all of our responsibility, and just what can you do? And that was definitely a theme that when we had our professional development day just yesterday, gosh, that I feel like came across and that people walked out of that day in different sessions. I heard just a lot of positive feedback about what can we do? And there's so much that we can do and so many resources that we do have. Yeah.
Totally.
Any questions?
So a lot of this seemed new. Do you guys need more? Do you guys need more professional development? Do you need more, or is that we'll find out in a?
It is ongoing.
Okay.
So
I mean, it
they've
seemed
been
like-
preparing us for a few years with certain trainings. They really
Okay.
upped that this last year. There were different trainings about MLSS or response to intervention kind of approaches versus our patterns of strengths and weaknesses, and then our adverse effect changes. I'll actually be meeting with fellow directors from our region and having a consult with our attorneys to talk about the finer points of how that different parts of it are impacted, such as an independent educational evaluation. If we're doing this process, what does that look like for a student or a parent who disagrees and would like a second opinion? Things like that. There's just
But you
quite
do
a bit.
feel supported at least with.
Supported as best we can,
Okay.
given that it's such big changes. It really
Yeah.
is historical
Yeah.
to make changes like this.
I think professional development is always something that we're looking to help drive our work. So certainly an area that we would continue to look towards.
And there was like a 3-part series last year that many special educators and actually teams of at a lot of sites, it was principals and academic support teachers and general education teachers took with special educators to try to understand these changes because they're not, they implicate everybody. And so that's really the message that we're trying to send is it's not necessarily just a special education PD, it's like a everybody PD. And so that's actually, I should have mentioned that, the presentation that we just gave at our first meeting, our first MLSS team meeting, one of the things that we did is we went through that presentation as a way to prepare each of the school-based representatives to actually give that same presentation, that same slideshow at staff meetings to all of the schools. And so in most sites, the buddy teacher from the central office co-presented with the MLSS representative at each of the schools. And so they were there to ask, to answer questions as they came up, so that we're just trying to give a consistent message to people.
Two more quick questions. How is this being communicated to families? And what's been the reaction of families to the communiques?
Yeah, it is. This presentation is now on our website, I believe. I think. And it is something that we talk about at our SEPAC, so our Special Education Parent Advisory Council. As far as communication with the broader, all families, I think that's something that we'll continue to work on at our MLSS meetings over
The ones that are being impacted, or they understand the changes?
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely a work in progress. I think it's something that you can hear once, but understanding what that looks like for your child necessarily can be a different thing. And so as families are walking through this with these new regulations, there's definitely just a piece of educating individual families, along the way.
Yeah. And there's opportunities. Just a couple of hours before this meeting, I was working with Mo on a list of topics that we could target to highlight in the next edition of The Connection in Act 173, and giving an update to the greater community is on that list. So
Yeah, that's a great idea.
that's another vessel that we can, promote and share the work of the school district. And CPAC was actually on that list as well, as a way to highlight the vision, the committee, and then an opportunity to ask for more participants, for more people to join.
So when families hear about it, are they happily receptive?
I think they're still trying to figure out exactly how this is going to impact their kid, you know, and I think that is still something that's unfolding as we move through this.
Many years of doing it a certain way, and with a change.
Yeah, it's different, but I will say, we're kind of like a little bit late to the party. Like most states have made these changes and they made them years ago. So it's not like uncharted territory that nobody knows how to walk through. It's just very new for Vermont.
I think the addition of like functional skills, although we're kind of, everyone's like, what is it? I think that's terrific because they impact students' abilities to learn in other areas and then just their day-to-day living. And I think that's a really positive change to special education. And I would guess parents are
That's right. And
happy about that.
It's aligning us more with our neighbors, as well as reducing our bar for adverse effect to just make it show that there is adverse effect, but it doesn't have to be the 15th percentile or below. I wanted to just segue to the SEPAC that Mark had mentioned. And Whitney, our Special Ed Parent Advisory Council holds monthly meetings. We created that last year, and it's an invested and empowered group of community members who attend and give us feedback and share ideas. So we're always seeking more parents, caregivers, school staff, students, community members who are just interested in supporting and understanding how our systems work to support students who have differences. And, there's a hope that we're going to create greater connections in our community and offer more support and perspectives on inclusion, special ed policy, service delivery, and really to provide more resources to our families of students who receive special ed in our schools. So we've been meeting for over a year, and it is an invested group. Our next meeting is actually October 17th from 4 till 5:15 at our central office at 53 Green Street. And so I wanted to share that this has been a very rewarding group to work with, and we do things like review our local special ed determination, which is a federal report that helps us identify how compliant we are with federal targets towards things like our initial evaluations being completed within 60 days, completing our 3-year evaluations in a timely fashion, our levels of inclusion, such as having a goal of 80% of students being in the mainstream classroom receiving their education at least 80% of the time or more. We've really had great increases in that very specific one, and that is a big goal within our CIP, our continuous improvement plan, to increase by another 10% this year, which is very ambitious, and we're very hopeful.
And this is all good news, and it's one of those many things that we talk about in SU that all the board members in SD would benefit from to convey to their leadership councils.
Yeah, and we did put out again a call out for all of our administrators to put it into their social media and into their newsletters to let family members and community know about our Special Ed Parent Advisory Council. If you can't attend in person, you can join remotely. So we have a good balance of both of those at each meeting. And we're looking to bring in people such as a representative. I've actually personally invited Jackie Kelleher, our former state director of special ed, who's the executive director of Vermont Family Network, which is a parent support agency that's actually federally funded with IDEA B Part D or something funds. She was explaining, she offers a great number of resources, not only having been our state director of special ed, who they have not yet successfully replaced, but also I think being a parent with a student with a disability, and then working with this agency who happens to have a lot of resources for families as well as educators. So I'm looking forward to scheduling to have her come and join our CPAC meeting in the upcoming months.
I've got a couple of hands online. Krista, you were first.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to give a little background, and then I wanted to pass it over to Joe and Robin. So I just wanted to give you a little background information about the SEPAC. So So a little history about SEPACs in Vermont. So I think back in 2018, 2019, I had started coming to school board meetings and talking to people about forming a SEPAC. This is at the same time Act 173 was just being proposed, and we were looking at the DMG findings. It seemed like a really perfect time to think about how do we, I think exactly what you were talking about, like how do you keep families and parents engaged in this process and in these changes? And so all of this is happening, and then COVID happened. And I just want to also note that one of the things that I wanted to recognize in terms of thinking about CPACs is that, I appreciate the comment regarding silos. Like special education comes under our special education, our district supervisory union umbrella. And because of that, we have a lot less participation. We have a lot less teachers involved. And so it's been really hard to kind of make that topic of special education kind of a priority in school board meeting discussions. I was like, how do we do that? I wasn't sure how to get parents involved. Just a little information about CPACs. They're in statute in many states, including our neighbor, Massachusetts. This means that it's written to law and that districts are required to have these. There's some great information about CPACs at the Federation of Children with Special Needs. We do not in Vermont have it in statute, but we have one town that had started a CPAC. And so we followed, and many of you know, Carrie Amadon knows this. I have come many times, and I have to say how thankful I am. This was like 2019, and now we're in 2023. Tate was really the one, and Whitney, who said, let's really make this happen. And I just wanted to give a huge thank you to them for doing that, because sometimes it's hard to take an idea and turn it into practice. As Tate talked about, the idea is that we are, and I think in the last year, we were kind of figuring out, like, what is our role? The idea is to do some advising and to be responsive and to be able to give input. And so as you talked about things like professional development and things like hiring, you think, oh, that's some, I think, goals that we hope for in the future would be that families on this council would be a part of advising in those kinds of areas, or at least giving input. So that's a little information about the CPAC. I was just going to pass it over to Joe to say a little bit more about our work.
Thank you, Kristen. So yeah, we'll go in order. Joe?
Okay, thank you. I didn't know if Krista was going to make it tonight, so I prepared a little statement, and I'll just read that for you. The mission of our SEPAC is to actively involve parents, families, and students to create collaborative partnerships with WSESU, faculty, staff, leadership, and community members dedicated to supporting and improving the education, outcomes, and experiences of students living with disabilities. For many parents like myself, speaking about their child's disabilities and history with special education needs is emotional. It can involve years of struggling to access resources and support, both of which are necessary to ensure their child's right to an education. Sometimes for a student to move through the levels of MTSS towards special education, it can take an entire year of evaluations, meetings, and paperwork. For a parent, that's an entire year that you watch your child struggle. They may even be punished for what they cannot do. It's heartbreaking to watch your child suffer in this way. And as a community, we must do better. To be successful, MTSS requires coordination, communication, professional training, and staff support, all of which the parents on the SEPAC feel are challenging for our schools and district. Of all these challenges, we feel most impacted by the communication struggles between families, schools, and district. Communication at BAMS and BOHS is reported as difficult by SEPAC members, while early education services has been reported as excellent. So we are wondering first, and in a timely manner, if some of our special educators at different grade levels could share best practices around communication. Other goals that our SEPAC has talked about is including members of this council on hiring committees, giving input on professional development focus, including training for teachers and paras around trauma and neurodiversity. We also are interested in working with the district to improve areas of weakness like communication. We'd like to take on a supportive role for parents as they navigate the special education process, which hopefully these changes won't make as difficult as it is. We'd also like to host a conversation about how disability issues can be added to the kind of social justice and diversity work that our schools do with students. So I just want to say I'll be emailing this statement to Mr. Spino and Mr. Erickson. I would love more people to join our advisory council. And I'd also like to request that the presentation given by staff tonight be shared with the SEPAC because it was very informative. So thank you so much.
So when you email that, could you email it to this board as well? I would like to see it attached to the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you.
Great, will do.
Robin?
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate this presentation and what Krista and Joe said. And I also, I didn't know if you were going to explain all that history, Krista, but I just wanted to appreciate you for how long you've been advocating for this to begin. And I'm so glad that our administrators have taken you up on that and really created something here. I think that now that the SEPAC has been existing for a year and it really has kind of defined itself and people sort of know what they're doing with that group, that it would be an excellent time to add a board member to this committee. I think this is a really similar structure to what we have in the WSESD as our leadership councils, where there's this group of stakeholders that are talking about their way that they specifically want to see impacts in their schools. And this is kind of an aligned structure for the SU. So I think it would really be a great way to ensure continued communication and lifting up these concerns and voices to have a WSESU board member that is assigned to attend the SEPAC meetings.
I'm happy to volunteer for that.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
Exciting.
I think I have the lowest leadership council burden, being mine is the career center. So I can certainly make room for that, and happy to listen, happy to help. Thank you so much, all three of you, for coming to talk to us. I think it was really important.
Thank you.
Deborah.
So Anne, why is Vermont so behind in legislating these issues?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, I don't know that I have the whole answer of why we're so far behind. Other states have been. I mean, when I was in North Carolina, that was my first teaching position in like 2012, and they were doing these things that we're just now doing. So I don't know why it's necessarily taken us so long. Tate, do you have a better answer than I do?
It may be related to our history of really intense local control and not being centralized as a piece of it. I know when I first got here in 2004 or 2003, 2004, we had schools within districts that were doing just apples to oranges for curriculum, and they had apples to oranges for supports in the schools within the same district. So I think we've come a really long way, and I think MLSS really helps us to understand that, you know, our systems can improve to provide those equitable outcomes if we are doing that collaborative model and really looking at our data.
Thank you.
Great. Now we have another presentation, not as lengthy. Paul's going to talk a bit about parent and community engagement and some elements of how we go beyond the school walls. Not everything that we're doing, but just some examples.
Sure, you get a twofer tonight. It's a double header. Pull this up. Start here. As Mark said, this is what I'll specifically talk about is a very small slice of all of the parent-family engagement work that we do. I would submit that, excuse me, the vast majority of parent-family engagement work is done by the school-based administrative assistants and administrators in their day-to-day communication with parents, with families, generally and specifically. As well, structures like the leadership councils clearly are a component of how we communicate with and sort things out with a community. What I specifically want to talk about here is some of the other pieces. And I think I got this assignment because I kind of do one of these little pieces, but I'm also aware of the different components throughout the district. Components like that little piece that I do, which is a federally required parent-family engagement component of the Title I funding that we receive. I'll talk about that in a little bit. There is a local family, have been in other schools. Additionally, local family engagement and education coordinator, that is to say funded locally. It's a position based in the school. That's at Academy School. There is and I won't talk about this at all, there are a set of special education social workers at the high school and middle school that do a ton of work with respect to those students on their caseload, focus on supporting the success of students on IEPs. Again, I'm not going to talk about that, but that component is there as well. There is a full-time BUHS student engagement coordinator, Winston Salesman, at the high school. His focus on re-engaging high school students into the work of school. And you heard from the school-based, either this board or the SD board, from the school-based social workers that we both funded, both locally and still some funded with the ESSER funds. And their work is really on sort of students and the needs of students, including that spectrum of individual counseling through to working with families as part of an engagement process. So there are all of these pieces that all fit together as part of parent-family engagement, but we sometimes don't think of them all together in the same group. In terms of Title I, because we are we get over a certain amount of Title I funding, we are required to spend about 1%. We actually spend more than that, to spend at least 1% of that overall funding on parent and family engagement activities. We set aside about $25,000 a year to be spread through the different Title I schools. So for this year, that doesn't include the high school, Dummerston, Guilford this year, and Vernon. So Academy, Oak, Green, Putney, and Brattleboro Middle School are the Title I schools this year. And we set aside a certain amount of funds for those schools to create activities, engagement activities that are focused on engaging parents in the work of the academic work of their children in schools. Can be, and I'll show you sort of what some of those activities are. Can be a variety of activities, and interestingly, it is one of the few places where there is money to pay for food for parent events. And it's not a whole lot of money, but it really goes a long way in terms of providing that incentive and that courtesy when families come in outside of school time to talk about the work of school.
Well, that is the obstacle of having to balance dinner and the activity.
Right. And childcare is also perfectly valid use of those funds for those kinds of meetings. I kind of went easy on I didn't bring in one of those parent-family engagement coordinators to talk to because they're all new this year. And I kind of didn't want to sort of put too much on them. We just met for the first time this afternoon. They're gonna. We had great conversations about the kinds of activities that they want to do. Some of which are sort of the traditional school activities. Some of which are great new ideas. And we just go through a process of They set up a budget. We make sure that the activities are fundable, give it the go-ahead, and then those activities take place over the course of the year. Because it's federal funds, we have to be really nitpicky about documenting. Like, if you've ever been to a parent event and have someone shove a sign-in sheet in front of you, that's one of the reasons is we've got to document that activity. As I say, can be used for coordinator stipends, food supplies for events, home visits. Talked about their requirements. There are some sample activities. Oh, actually, I can show the slide rather than just looking at the whole thing. There, bigger font anyway. As I say, and that last piece, it's really tempting to just use the funds for celebrations. And that's not really the purpose. There has to be some component that is related to engaging the families in the work of schools. So have a celebration, have a, sort of just a family engagement celebration, or a math night, and use the money to buy a deck of cards for all of the families and teach them during the meeting, here's some really simple math games you can play with your kids with these cards to tie into the work that's being done in school. Another common event is a literacy breakfast, where we use some of the funds to buy books to give to kids to take home, pull the parents in, give them a little coffee and donuts, and talk about how the importance of reading with your child, and some tips on some ways to make that happen, and what's happening in school that would parallel that work at home, that sort of thing. Here are some of the practices, and there are, as I say, there are celebrations, fundraisers, parent resource room. Those are activities. The really high impact activities are things like home visits, data sharing folders, math nights, classroom observations, parent help online projects. And we try and support the individual engagement coordinators in creating those activities. There is also, as I said, a family engagement coordinator that is locally funded. That's Jody Matulke, and at Academy School. And I sort of asked her, at least we got some words from one of the family engagement folks. My job as family engagement coordinator is most often connecting families to community resources, organizations, and/or agencies. Times I may be working individually with caregivers. Other times I may be working closely with school staff to help support students. And then she's provided this whole, I don't mind to read them, but you can have a look through a whole list of the kinds of things that a family engagement individual would do.
A lot of things that social workers are doing as well.
Right, and part of the point is family engagement is a really broad brush, and how there invariably are going to be some overlaps between a person that we call a social worker, the kinds of things that they might do, and a person that we call a family engagement coordinator. And for both of them, some of the activities might be overlapping with the kinds of activities that we fund with Title I. But it's all toward that end of making sure our students are successful by engaging the families to be partners in that work. Similarly, Amy Johnston, who at one point was identified as a sort of a locally funded engagement coordinator. She is actually now a full board social worker. But if you look through this list, it's again that set of I would say activities that smooth the way for families to be able to be engaged and their kids to be engaged in school. And again, I'm not going to read through, but there are many of them there. And that's it. What are your questions? Tim.
I recently heard from a parent that traumatized kids, the parents of traumatized kids feel very reluctant to go to school, any school activity, because they were traumatized in that same school. Sure. They don't want to go back. This gets to you rightly said, home visits are one of the most impactful measures. I would like to know if we have sufficient funding to do all the home visitations and all the engagement for the neediest families in the district. Are we doing enough? Do we have enough funding for it? I'd like to, I think, I can't speak for the board, but I would love data on, for example, the full-time student engagement worker at BUHS. How much of his or her time is spent on home visits, and what is his or her job? Who is that person, do you know?
Winston Salesman.
Oh, Winston.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Great guy. I'd like to know what his job entails.
So to answer your question about funding, as you know, over the past handful of years, we have added to our budget a great deal in the area of clinicians and social workers and engagement workers. So I would say comparatively to other school districts that we are very well funded in supporting positions like that.
Yeah, the difficulty is how do you get those parents that see schools as just a bad place to go to?
I think the simple answer is don't give up on them.
Yeah.
You just got to keep coming back, try a different angle, try a different way, but don't give up on them.
Other questions?
Oh, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Get my agenda back up here.
I actually have lots of questions.
Oh,
I just
I'm
have
sorry,
to,
Deborah.
no, but I just have to let so much of this settle for me this evening. Because this is powerful. And when I think about my own experience, no matter the school, there are students that I've taught, the parents have never visited the school, except for graduation, and that's it. There's this terrific insecurity, sometimes because of cultural differences, and not feeling as if you fit in to the given culture of a school. Again, it's a comment in support of what Tim was saying. How do you reach those families and bring them in? And when you bring one in, that connection is great because there'll be chatter in the group. I don't know whether affinity groups help or not.
I think if you look in particular, I'm thinking about some of Jody's bullet points about the kind of work that she does, but Amy does the same thing. The other social workers do the same thing. Other folks that we've talked about. Providing the resource services, the connections to community resources, the connections, maybe it's transportation to a dental appointment or working with SEPAC for power support for bills for power. Providing the resources that are important to those individuals, I think, is probably going to be one of our really golden strategies for doing that. And that's really what a lot of those folks are doing. And for some reason, Jody is really coming to mind in terms of conversations I've had with her about, how are you making connections with the families? And it's about providing resources.
I'm sick of using COVID as a thing, but we started investing in social workers prior to COVID, and we're making really great gains, especially in Brattleboro town, which I more intimately know because I was in the middle of it. And COVID hit, and that provided another major setback. We were saying, you can't come into this school, just your kids, and we have to be 6 feet away from each other. So we're very much climbing out of that, and I think this is a great year to kind of reset in terms of all the things we're doing as a school system prior to COVID. But yeah, I think we need to continue to look at what we were doing prior and get creative around new ideas to engage our parents. Because we want them in our schools. It's the opposite. We want you in now. We want you back. We want to build our community.
I think about it, like, how do we connect with, like, how do we reach students that are unreachable or seem unreachable? Like, we connect with them, we develop relationship, we don't give up, like you said, Mark.
Right.
We work really hard, and I think it's about checking our own bias about families, making sure we're paying attention to that, and connecting with them, inviting them in, building relationships, so understanding, creating space so we can understand what the apprehension is about, not make an assumption about what the apprehension is about. Like, we might think, oh, they had a terrible experience in the school, and that might be true, and we need to sort of try to help remedy that, if you will, but we cannot make an assumption about why they aren't there. We often hold meetings when parents can't come. I know you talked about the ways we do things to help parents with, stipends and dinner and childcare and stuff, but we have to think about, when are we holding PTO meetings? When are we holding these things? And so that they're accessible, where are we holding them? So that they're accessible to all families. And if the location is the issue, then we need to think about starting with teaming with them outside of that building that they're afraid of.
Sure.
But it's about relationships, which is all of this work is about relationships.
Yeah, I'm thinking of community schools, that model where the schools really go out into the community in the northwest, northeast. But maybe we should be not inviting them in, but us going more to places like Turning Point, the Route, to other places in the community. Instead of wanting them to come in, we go out there.
You need them
Good
where they're
idea.
at.
Another, just in terms of Mark's point about the investment that we've made, right now we have 10 social workers in our Windham Southeast School District, and that is a significant increase over where we were 5 years ago.
Great, thank you.
Now we come to the point in proceedings when we accept public comment on non-agenda items. I'm not seeing a whole lot of public. So, going once? Anybody? Bueller? Okay.
You're dating yourself with that one.
Yeah. It's not hard to date myself these days.
So you're ready to move
Moving
it.
on. Oh, okay, I believe we have policies to, would you like to take 5? Yeah, okay. We're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back. It is 7:07, we'll be back at 7:12. And we are back, moving on to unfinished business. We have policies to discuss. Deborah, do you want to step in? You don't have to, I can do it. We have policies presented for a second reading, F10, reporting suspected child abuse or neglect, and H7, leadership councils. And since everybody in this room who's a board member is on that committee, I bet we've read them. However, we have the following policies to present for adoption. D3, staffing and job descriptions. C7, board relations with administrators. B3, board conflict of interest. H8, access control and visitor management. And E17, fire and emergency preparedness drills. Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve those policies?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? And those policies are adopted for the SU. We have the holding space for the superintendent evaluation in case there is anything to discuss. We met last week with a representative from the VSBA. And the surveys are being worked on right now, and hopefully Mark has his information in, and if you are a member of the cabinet or a member of the school board, you can expect an email asking you to fill out this information sometime within the next couple of weeks, to the best of my knowledge.
Yes.
Any word back from Jen Nichols?
That was gonna be on my new business. But if there's nothing else on the superintendent evaluation for the time being, under new business, do we have any new hires or resignations?
We do not.
I didn't think so, but you never know. So under very new business, I did hear back from Jay Nichols. The project to survey staff, faculty, is not actually a product of the Vermont Principals Association, but rather of Jay Nichols' independent private consulting business. He did send me a form with an example. I'm going to forward that along to you, and I think at our next meeting we can have a talk. I'm not sure how appropriate it is for someone currently the director of the Vermont Principals Association to have an independent consulting business with boards, but we can talk about that. We can call people, we can look and see if there's another opportunity. But I did hear back from him, and I will send you his sample. It contains, like Principal Susie, and it's very theoretical, but it should explain everything to you.
So can you check on the legality of this relationship with Pietro Lynn?
I can, absolutely.
So would he charge us to use his form?
So he's
I would think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is functioning as an independent consultant. So I am not sure that would be appropriate. But once you've taken a look at what he has to offer, then maybe we can make a decision as far as either what he's doing or what somebody else has to offer. There has to be somebody else out there willing to do this for us if we're interested.
Because you're looking for a staff or a,
Yes.
totally just blank.
A staff evaluation form.
You're looking for a climate survey, in effect. Is that the right?
Somewhere between a climate survey and an actual evaluation is because people at the bottom don't really evaluate people above them, but yeah, it'll be somewhere between a climate survey and an evaluation, I think is how I'd best describe
An
it.
evaluation of the school community?
I believe what he's offering is district and leadership,
Okay.
and that's what we were interested in hearing, I expect, not just about Mark, for example, but about
Right.
the principals and about how they feel about their role and how they're working within the NCO.
We might be able to grow our own,
We might be able to grow our own.
or I can make one and charge you for it.
That would definitely be a conflict of interest, and we did just about a board
conflict.
interest policy on this board.
So I know as a faculty member that we do want to evaluate our principals and our superintendents. And in faculty meetings again and again, it comes up, but it doesn't go anywhere. Or it's just stymied completely. But I do think that line of communication cements how your employees feel, the loyalty that they feel to the institution, that their voices are being heard. So an evaluation it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Just as a faculty member, I have appreciated when the pre-observation, the actual individual in my classroom, the write-up of it, it gives me a sense of what I'm doing because someone external to me is viewing it. Or the times when I've been, God forbid, videotaped. So I think it's something that we should look into. I don't know that we can do it this go round because we're right on top of it at this point. But I would love to give voice to everyone who works in the district.
I think it's a great idea. It was just, this was my initial contact and I went, but there has to be somebody else available or we can look into it.
Does the VSBA do anything?
No, the VSBA is actually who referred us to Jay.
Oh, okay,
And then when I
okay.
contacted Jay, I
Gotcha.
found out
That's right.
it's his private consulting business, not a
Not-
function of the Vermont Principals Association.
Gotcha, okay.
And I think, I mean, we can read the questions, but one of the things I've discovered about surveys and evaluation is what questions are asked is super duper important.
Yeah.
And if Jay's coming at it from the Vermont Principals Association wanting answers, the questions might be different than what we're interested in hearing. So I suggest that we have a look at more than one source and think about what we want to ask. But this is not an action, this is just a discussion.
This is just, yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Terry.
There being no further business before this board, I move we adjourn.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? And this meeting is adjourned at 7:22. Thank you so much, everybody.